Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 4. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and today we're going to discuss pain. So we're going to talk about the history of pain, and then we're going to go in and talk about and discuss what our understanding of pain now, and then what actually influences it. Then on top of that, I want to talk a small bit, because of the times and the way things are with COVID and all that around, I want to talk a small bit about how that will have an effect on people's pain. And lastly, then we'll talk about a couple of case studies or experiences that I've had in dealing with patients that have had pain. So when you look back at the literature and what the original thought of was around pain, it was based in this idea that it was a punishment for sin. And it moved on then, it was really religious based, but as a lot of ideas were at the time, it moved on then with Hippocrates and his associates who discussed this humoral theory and humorism. So humoral theory was based in the idea that there was an imbalance in the body's humours. And the main humours then were you had phlegm, blood, yellow bile, and then black bile as well. And then disease or illness was based off a deficiency or an excess or imbalance in one of these humours in the body. So that's what medicine was based off of at the time, was realigning these humours. And it's interesting when you look at it and you look at our understanding of what pain is now, and they are related in a way. So they were considered to be influenced by diet, occupation, age, and even the astronomy and relationships. So good few different things of what they were influenced by. And you'll hear me talking a small bit about the biopsychosocial model. And it's funny in that was back in medieval times or even before it. And now it's still in line with some of the thinking as what there is now. Moving on from then, we went into humanism. So humanism was in and around about the 16th century. And this was based more in physics. And it was a physician who thought that the body was, who found that the body was based off of levers and pulleys, and it was like pumps. So he said it was very mechanical by nature. And this is kind of when the change went to more of a scientific view on the body over a spiritual view. So William Harvey and René Descartes were two physicians who were documenting their research on cadavers back in the 16th century. Descartes then, he published a couple of journals or books detailing the human body and his understanding of the human body. Now, in one of the books, there was one of his researchers who was working with him had drawn a picture of a boy who was putting his toe in a fire, or putting his toe on the edge of the fire, to explain the nervous system and to explain how pain was transferred or transmitted through the body. Now, the image itself is very basic. It's basically just a drawing of a boy putting his toe beside a fire, and then there's a line going from his toe that goes all the way up to his brain, and it goes to the pituitary gland in his brain. And it's only one line. It shows that basically that second he touches the fire, that impulse is sent through the body straight to the brain to warn it of danger. It was interesting then that that image wasn't really picked up on that much, but as time passed by and as we got closer to the 19th century, then that was actually taken up a lot more. And that was kind of the prevailing view then, in that it was danger sent an impulse through the body to the brain, and that's what generated pain. And when you think about it now, even our own understanding, that is kind of the prevailing theory in the general population, and that's what you would think is causing pain. But there's a lot more factors involved than just straight impulse to experience. So in this way, it separated the mind from the body, and it said that the body was your sensory information, or all the sensory information was coming into the body, in through the brain, and that your mind and your psychological well-being had nothing to do with it. Now, it's interesting to say that historians found out after, when they looked into the novels and the journals put out by René Descartes, that he did actually have a lot of theories in relation to the mind and the body, how they were connected. But the majority of that was lost in time. And it was this image that it was depicted the boy with the fire that really came through all the journals and followed through till even today's idea of pain. So the message itself actually got lost in time, which is an interesting one to look at, and how much of an influence it had on our understanding of pain, and how much of an influence it had on medicine to date, although it was actually only his associate that drew the picture as a side picture to describe what they had originally thought was causing pain. So we cycle forward 200 years then, and we come to the Paris School of Medicine. And this school in itself brought experts from all over the world in to discuss medicine and discuss techniques and ideas behind it and to find out where the real evidence was. Now, this school turned out to reject humoral theory, which was still a strong theory at the time, in that what I mentioned earlier about having different humors off in your body and having an imbalance in those humors or in your body's humors, they were rejecting that. And then they came up with the idea that for you to have any pain and disease must be a result or a problem with a single organ or a single area of the body. They said pain is a result of a threat or danger or a disease in a specific area of the body. So that kind of drew on then, and that's what built our idea on pain and what is pain today. So this approach of the one single organ or area being the problem and being the cause of pain has been very effective over the years in terms of figuring out and diagnosing problems, and has furthered medicine a good bit in the last 200 years. So it's definitely an approach that shouldn't be put aside. But the one thing about it is that it neglects to take into account that their mind might have something to do with it, or that the psychological well-being of that person might have something to do with it. So this is the main fault of the Paris School of Medicine's idea of a single issue. So this approach then is called dualism. And dualism is, if it's not in the body, it must be in the mind. That was the idea behind it. They didn't really connect the two of them together. They said it's one or the other. And a good example of this is there was a Dr. Knott, who was working on a soldier in the American Civil War, and he was injured in a train accident and his leg had to be amputated. After the first surgery then, it was amputated just below the knee, and he came back 6 to 8 months later, and he was getting this pain in the area the leg was first, which is now called phantom pain. So phantom pain is basically when an amputee or a person who has had an amputation is getting pain in the area that the limb would have been initially. Now there's reasons behind this, in that that area is still represented on the brain. The brain is still thinking that area is there, obviously, but because of severe injury, a lot of the times these had to be removed. So when he returned to Dr. Knott then, he proceeded to remove the stump up to above his knee. So he took the knee from him, thinking that that was the main issue, is that there was still pain in the area that he was feeling, but he just wasn't describing it well. And then the soldier came back again, and he was describing pain that was in his amputated limb. It was a pain that he couldn't touch and he couldn't get to, and it was an itch that he wasn't able to scratch because it was in the area that the limb had been removed. So the doctor operated on him again and took out his sciatic nerve up to the hip, and then he removed more of the limb. Now, after I think it was 4 to 5 surgeries of removing more and more and more, the doctor came to the conclusion that the problem wasn't in his body and the problem was in his mind, that he was addicted to opiates and that he was looking for more opiates all the time. So he put it down to a psychological problem and not a physical problem. And this is the main fault of dualism, in that they say that if it isn't in the body, it has to be in the mind. So fast forward then to World War I, and we had another physician, René Lerick, and he found that he was able to operate on some soldiers who were severely wounded in battle without any anesthetic at all. And that some of them had severe pain, but then others were okay, and they had no issue to go through the surgery without anesthetic. So after documenting the soldiers that he was able to operate on with no pain, he came to the conclusion that physical pain couldn't simply just be an impulse along the nerve. It couldn't just be from, say, the fire shooting straight to the brain, and that it had to be a result between conflict between stimulus and the whole individual himself. So you can kind of see now where the idea of the mind is coming in, and how the mind has to have an effect on pain. And the thing is, this guy wasn't only operating on a few people. He was set up in Italy at the time, this René Lerick. He was set up in Italy at the time, and he was operating on hundreds of soldiers, and he started documenting it in a scientific journal or in his own journal, and then he went to publish that after to show that these results weren't made up and that they were consistent. So pushing on then, guys, and I promise I won't go into a lot of detail on everything now, but it does give you a better idea. And the idea, as the reason I'm building it up and talking through it is because you can see where the different ideologies came out of and how that affected our thinking on pain to date. So gate control theory came around in the 1950s to 1960s, and this was an interesting one. They found, and there was research back in this, that a larger threat gets through the nervous system and to the brain, and it's interpreted by the brain. So an easy example would be that if I was pinching your arm and then I was like, let's say pinching at maybe 30 or 40%, not too hard, but you were feeling it, and then I stamped down on your foot, you're going to feel the pain coming through your foot, and you're not going to feel the pain coming through your arm at the same time. So it's going to be the larger threat, or the one that's weighted more in your brain, and what your brain perceives to be the larger threat is what you're going to feel and what you're going to experience. And they found that it wasn't actually the brain itself that was doing this, that it was the brain, but it was the brain and the spinal cord. So it was your central nervous system that was having an effect on this. It was now then that you could say that they were making progress in that they were figuring out that the brain is modulating the pain and is deciding what is going to be a bigger threat. And that had huge implications across medicine then. The gate control theory did have a lot of weight in it. It did definitely interest a lot of researchers. And Gary Melzak and Pat Wall were involved in finding out about gate theory initially. They went on to study phantom pain. And phantom pain is what we just discussed earlier about where you're getting pain in a limb that's no longer there. So the idea that if you were able to get pain in a limb that wasn't there at all anymore, that must mean that the pain isn't in the limb itself and that it's actually created in the brain. And that was kind of a revelation for them, and that's how they started to decide and develop this neuromatrix theory. So it was through this theory then that they came to explain that sensory information in itself is not as is. It's how the brain perceives it, or how your neuromatrix perceives it. And then coming back to the picture of the child in the fire, which is very interesting. And if anyone, you should just look it up. It's René Descartes' interpretation of pain. But this idea of putting your foot in fire, what's actually causing that impulse, or what's causing you to pull away, or what's causing you to feel the pain of that fire. And it's not exactly your toe feeling that and then that's going straight to your brain. What it has more to do with is that it's your brain is interpreting the threat, even if you're looking at it and you can see the threat. What it's saying is that's the biggest issue at the moment. That's a fire that's hot. If I stay here any longer, that's going to cause me a lot of damage. So it's going to pull away from that and it's going to get away from that as quick as it can. And it's that interpretation of, or how it perceives it, is what drives pain in the body. And this is something that's going to come across with every injury and with every condition. So this was a massive development in our understanding of the pain today. If your brain is deciding then what level of threat something is or a stimulus is, you have to look at where's it getting the information to differentiate what's a bigger threat. This is where the interesting, from my perspective, is the most interesting part, is that it takes in personal information and past experiences, so different thoughts and emotions, and then from that it starts to generate sensations. The really interesting part is that the neuromatrix makes things personal, and how it makes it personal is it looks at past experiences, memories, and then takes into account emotions and thoughts, and then the actual sensory information that's coming in itself. So is it hot or is it too cold? And then it adds all this together to give you the level of pain or to generate the sensation. So a good example of this would be if a partner strokes your leg. If you're sitting in the cinema and you get a stroke in the leg from your partner, or if you're sitting in the cinema and you get a stroke in the leg from a random person, there is a different response and both feel different. And this is the result of it taking into account the sensory information that's coming in directly, and then your thoughts and emotions and your past experiences that's already stored in your brain. So in that, it takes into account the levels of stress that you're at the moment, anxiety and sleep, and it adds all these together to give you your pain experience. So the neuromatrix theory is one that I want to push. Now, if you can get your head around that idea that depending on the sensory information that's coming in, that mixes with your personal experience and your emotions and your thoughts at the time, and then that generates the amount of pain that you're getting and the amount of pain that you're feeling. If you can get your head around that, you'll have a way better understanding of pain and what's causing it. And this is especially important for people who, when you do get that random pain in your shoulder that comes on every once in a while, and you do get that random back pain. Now, if it's something that's causing you a lot of pain, causing you pain at night or causing you severe pain, then you should definitely get it checked by a doctor on that. But if it's a pain that, like a neck pain that comes on and goes away, and you don't really know what it is, and it's always it's like a chronic pain, it's coming on and off every once in a while, you need to remember this neuromatrix theory and how that may be affecting it. So moving on then to the idea of sensitization. So sensitization, if anyone has followed me on Instagram or on LinkedIn or on just this podcast, you'll hear me discussing the idea of taking down your pain sensitivity to an area or around an area and how mobility can help that. The researchers found that you have these certain nerve endings that are called nociceptors. So some nociceptors that you may have would be chemoreceptors, which sense chemicals, thermoreceptors, which sense heat. Then you have mechanoreceptors as well. And the mechanoreceptors are if somebody's standing on your foot, pressure is the easiest way to describe it. These are sending sensory information to the brain, and it's your brain that actually interprets this. But these nociceptors were only found in the late 60s, early 70s. And what they've come up with is that the more these are used, the more sensitive they become, which goes along with anything in the body. The more you use it, the better you get at using it. So that can work for or against you. This peripheral sensitization, the authors or researchers found that there was a higher or more ferocious response to the same stimuli if it was applied over time. So if the person held their hand over a 60-degree radiator, let's say, for example, over a period of time, even if they took it on and took it off, the more context they had with it, then there would be a higher response through the nociceptors. So they'd have a higher relay onto the brain. So then the brain would interpret that as a higher threat, even though it's the same temperature. So this is more to do with time and use. So Clifford Wolf then, who was studying in Pat Wall's University or Pat Wall's laboratory in London at the time, was testing rats, and they found that he was finding that at the end of the day his results were skewed in that there was a higher response even from lighter touch in the nervous system of these rats, and he couldn't place anything on it, didn't really understand what was happening. So it was going on for a couple of months before he figured out that the rats themselves, their nervous system of them gets very sensitive to light stimuli after prolonged danger. So if it was there for a whole day and it was getting threats in it all day long, by the end of the day, even a light threat was registered as a more severe threat. So this is a huge discovery then in what was actually causing chronic pain in people. Why were they getting higher? Why was they getting more of a response to the same stimuli or less stimuli? And when they looked at it, then they found that, as everything else in the body is, the nervous system was plastic and that it was adapting, and it was the actual architecture of it was changing. So because of the increased threat throughout the day, and then it was finding that light touch was becoming more of a threat then, and then heavy touch was actually becoming a fairly severe threat, and it was getting a fairly severe response. So as with anything, the more if you use it, our neurons are wired together. If you use it more, you get better at it. Unfortunately, this works the opposite way as well, in terms of what you don't want to happen in relation to pain. So it explains why people with back pain, if you are thinking about it all the time, and if you find it to be a big threat, how this will increase your sensitivity around the area. So when you do try move, you'll get a lot of pain from it, and it's from that idea of central sensitization. Now, central sensitization itself is down the line in that's obviously more of a change in that it's very long standing, it's chronic then. So this central sensitization is associated as well with, like you could say, an ankle sprain, or if somebody has osteoarthritis in the hip. And osteoarthritis in the hip, or OA in the hip, is a really interesting one. OA in general is an interesting one because osteoarthritis is wear and tear, so it's age-related changes. Now, somebody who's centrally sensitized and has osteoarthritis could get pain referring down their leg, and they could have severe pain when walking as well. And it's because that nervous system is overprotective of the area. So what causes that is the issue. Is it the way they've been thinking? Is it an increase in stress in their life? Is it an increase in noxious stimuli in other places? So let's just take stress, for example. Stress is a good one because stress has an effect on your nervous system. So if your nervous system is constantly getting stressed and it's constantly under threat and in danger, then you will become centrally sensitized to a lot of other things. So now it's kind of coming back into that idea that mind and body are connected and everything is tied in together. Central sensitization is also associated with irritable bowel syndrome, migraine, and the majority of people who have it will have anxiety and depression as well. It's associated with those, I should say, not the majority, it's associated with those. So it can affect your mood, and you can get like bright if you'd be affected by bright light if you're centrally sensitized, or loud noises, or you might find that your memory is foggy as well, is another one. So it does really affect your nervous system in a multitude of different ways. And it's because that nervous system is connected to everything, and it drives everything in your body, and your brain picks up so much information from thoughts and emotions and past experience. Even though those you might disconnect that from the body, it can come through in your body in that your nervous system is more aware. Its awareness has increased, and it just feels under pressure all the time. It feels like it's under threat all the time. That's where it comes into the fact that pain in itself is more so an opinion of the organism's state. So it's an opinion of how you feel. It's your brain's opinion of how you feel. It might not be conscious. It might not be your own conscious opinion of how you feel. It could be more of a subconscious issue, but it's that more so than it is a reflective response to injury or an exact response to injury. So everyone's not going to have the exact same pain for the same injury. Everyone's not going to have some people are going to be able to cope better. Some people aren't going to be able to cope better. People that are centrally sensitized because of increased amount of stress in their life won't be able to cope with it as well, or will find it harder to cope with it as well, because that pain will be felt higher, or that pain will be felt more severe. Now, this is kind of the area that you have to think about and where people get caught a lot, is that they say pain is in my head. So it's not in your head specifically. Well, it is in your head, okay, but you could, if you want to say it's in my head, it's in my brain, like, yes, it is, but it's not your conscious effort that's pushing your pain all the time. Now, you can add to that by worrying about stuff and by catastrophizing things, so making things worse than they actually are. Now, that will play into your pain, but it's your nervous system and how it's picking up and interpreting all this different information that's coming into it. That's what's really driving your pain. So if you can change the information that's going in, then you can change your pain. And this comes back to the idea, and I put up a post on Instagram about it as well, is that MRIs for back pain are really not that effective. And now back pain is going to be a completely different podcast, and I could go into detail on it about the different ideas, but back pain itself, lower back pain, 95% of people with non-specific lower back pain don't have an acute injury, or don't have a muscle tear or a muscle strain, or don't have any disc bulging touching off a nerve, or say spinal stenosis, nothing like that. So back pain in itself is a result of biological, which could be peripheral or central sensitization. Then it could also be a result of psychological, so stress, fear, fatigue, and then it could also be, or I suppose fatigue kind of goes under that biological more so, but yeah, stress, fatigue, or stress, fear, and anxiousness. And then social, and social is one that people don't really think about as much, but it plays a huge role. And social could be role conflict, in that you feel that you're not fulfilling your potential. It could be job dissatisfaction, and you just don't like your job. And all these different things are going to play in and come into play. And that's the biopsychosocial model. We'll talk about a small bit as we go through. But the main thing I want you to take from this so far is, and I keep repeating it, pain is in your nervous system. Pain, and going back to that quote again, pain is an opinion of on the organism's state of health. So it's how you perceive your feeling, or how your body or how your brain perceives its feeling, more so than the actual injury itself. So MRIs then themselves, like, this is when we go back to talking about pain and pain science and people that are coming in with chronic pain and injuries and stuff that they don't really know what happened. It was insidious onset. They don't really remember a specific incident that I hurt it here or I hurt it there, or I was lifting something and I hurt it. A lot of the time that doesn't happen. And then they come in and they'll look, because it's lower back pain and because it's in a certain area of their back, they'll say, and there's a lot of worry around your back because of the amount of nerves that are coming through there, and the idea that if you did actually damage the spinal cord itself, then you could be paralyzed. So you have to take that into account all the time. That is one of the societal pressures, or one of the psychological pressures of back pain, that's why it's such an issue for a lot of people. And then if you're getting that pain that's non-specific, you're only getting in certain movements, you're only getting it at certain times, and you go for a scan, and then the scan comes back and it says on the scan you have a bulging disc at L5, and I can guarantee you, the people that are listening to this, a lot of people will have a bulging disc somewhere in the back, or will have a bulging disc at L5 or S1 or L4, L3, or they could have a bulging disc in their neck as well. But if that bulging disc hasn't been shown to be touching off a nerve directly and pushing on that nerve, then you aren't going to get any pain from a bulging disc itself. What I get a lot then is, and I always hear in the gym, is people say, I have a bulging disc here, I have to watch these movements, Bulging discs they'll heal in time, they'll heal themselves, because that's what the body does. The only way we can reproduce is if it's able to heal itself once it's been stressed. So if you have a bulging disc, most likely, and even if it is causing you pain, even if it is touching off a nerve, which can be severe pain, and there's no doubt about it, if it can be real shocking pain, that will in time cure itself and it'll go back in, because you have to think about it, it's not optimal for that to be in that position all the time. So the body will try cure itself. Now, that's if it's given adequate recovery time and the right conditions, it'll heal itself. But if you're feeding it negative information, and an easy one to think about it is going on Google and looking up symptoms. It must be one of the worst things you can do for any disease or any illness or any condition. Now, it can obviously help you out in some ways and give you a better idea what it is, but when you go on Google, because of given general information in medicine and in physio, you don't really want to do it as much, because if there's certain red flags that can be related to, like cancers and tumors growing and like cauda equina and different very serious issues or conditions. So Google has to take those into account, and the person that's writing that has to take that into account, because they don't want to be held responsible for somebody who looked it up on Google, looked up a couple of symptoms and said, it's all right, like you're all right, you only have this and this. So they have to put in the most severe cases as well. And if you're looking that up, obviously if you're seeing things and you have a couple of symptoms, and if you're prone to neuroticism, in that you experience negative feelings and have a negative mood and anxiety and depression a lot, you're going to be drawn to those severe or worst case scenario ideas or worst case scenario conditions on Google. So you want to it's best to just get that assessed by a physio first, or I should say get it assessed by a doctor first, to make sure that's nothing serious. And then if it's a musculoskeletal condition, getting that assessed by a physio. And then coming back again to the idea of an MRI, if you get an MRI in your back and it shows that bulging disc, and you take that as is and you say, I have a bulging disc, you have confirmed to yourself that there is a threat there or a danger in your body. And coming back to what we talked about earlier, if your body feels there's a threat or it's in imminent danger, then that's where the pain comes out of. So if you are going on Google and checking that as well, you're feeding it that negative information, and you're feeding it that threat and danger all the time. And if you're feeding it that, you will get centrally sensitized because your nervous system is under pressure all the time. Now, it's so much easier said than done, and because of the way society is now, and it's so easy to get information, it's very hard not to do those things. But the one thing is, don't, as you're grown-ups, I know, but don't believe everything you read, especially when it comes to health, and especially when it comes to products that are good for health, because they will say anything. And I think the ads on TV are so funny when they'll name out a couple of symptoms. Are you fatigued? Have you back pain? Do your legs get sore sometimes? Random symptoms. And then if you are high in neuroticism, you can connect those symptoms very easily and say, yes, I am that and that and that. I need whatever this guy's selling, or I need that. Now, what's one way that we can counteract that central sensitization? Or what's one way that we can make the body feel like it's safe again? So coming back to it, one way that we can make it feel like it's safe again is exercise. So exercise sends safety messages to the neural matrix. Other things that work as well would be having a supportive workplace, a place that you feel comfortable, where you enjoy working, that you feel like you're valued. And then on top of that, having a friend to talk to. And that really comes back to mental health. Having somebody you can talk to is going to be huge in helping you get through pain, because everybody gets pain for things at different stages of their life, and it might be psychosomatic, or it might be related to, let's say, that neural matrix getting negative information and a few things added up in your life, and then you're feeling pain. Everyone gets it, and there's no point saying that I or anybody that I know is not going to get pain for anything. You're going to get pain at some time, so it's how you manage that pain and how you manage the information you're feeding yourself. So if you try that first, that's why exercise should be a go-to before having any surgery or any severe surgery. And in terms of when I'm working with clients myself, I do send out a weekly check-in that, well, I do weekly calls, but I send out a weekly check-in to monitor fatigue and monitor mood and monitor pain, just to see where they're at that week. And we'll discuss it and we'll talk about it. And a lot of the time we'll see your stress was really high this week. Your stress was a 7 this week. And then your pain was a 6 as well. And we've noticed that over the last 3 or 4 weeks that these two things are correlated. So how can we bring your stress from a 6 down to a 4? What can we do to make that work? And you'll find a lot of the time, if you can take stress down from a 6 to a 4, or if you can improve sleep from 5 hours to 7 hours, then you'll find that pain comes down, or that they won't be thinking about the pain as much. That's why I say exercise should be your first one once you have got that condition assessed, especially musculoskeletal conditions, because the body fixes itself. And going for surgery such as a lumbar fusion now, and people are going to be listening to this and they're saying, there's definitely, it could have been the right option for you. So we won't rule anything out yet, but it definitely could have been the right option for you. But lumbar fusions, knee arthroscopies, where they take out a bit of the cartilage in your knee, or shoulder decompressions, just those 3 surgeries alone, or rotator cuff repair a lot of the time, very low evidence in the research to support that they are any better for you to get that surgery than it is to go through physiotherapy and see what you're like in a year. So on a 1-year follow-up, there's very little evidence supporting either of those or any of those surgeries. But they're so commonplace because people commonly feel these are commonly getting these injuries, like they're getting that back pain that's consistent. They don't know what's causing it. They're centrally sensitized, and then they're getting that shoulder pain, or they're getting the knee pain as well, and they don't know what's causing it. There's interesting research to support the fact that 75% of people that are asymptomatic playing sports have a labral tear in their hip. And a labral tear is a cartilage tear in your hip, and how many people get a surgery and are out for 8 to 10 weeks of the season because of that? Rehabbing, taking a piece out of the joint and then rehabbing it. It's not going to be the same for everyone, and everyone's going to be different, but you have to take that into account. What's causing the pain in some people that are getting that, and what's causing it in people that aren't getting that? So that's when we need to look at that and look at the factors that may be contributing to that pain. And the thing is, I know a lot of my friends have got knee surgeries and have had the arthroscopies and have had hip arthroscopies as well. But the thing is, if you went through a structured program before you did that for 8 weeks, because the thing is, the only difference really between these surgeries And a lot of the time, what they're finding is before the surgery, you don't have to do the rehab for 6 to 8 weeks because you haven't got the surgery. But after the surgery, because you've got the surgery, you feel obligated, or you have to do the rehab after. You don't really have a choice. So you're putting yourself in the position that you have to go through the rehab. Now, I gone off course there a small bit, so I digress in what I was talking about. But we need to look at these conditions such as osteoarthritis, back pain, knee pain as well. Issues like that, shoulder pain is a huge one. What's actually driving the pain in that? And how can we help these people? Like, how can you help yourself? And it's through that exercise, through stress management, through improving your sleep. See how that has an effect on your pain. I can get some amount of messages now from people on Instagram saying, well, I got the knee surgery, I got a shoulder surgery. So don't, like, if it was right for you at the time, I'm not putting it aside at all. If it's better now, perfect. It was exactly what you needed to do. So there's no writing that off at all, and don't think that I am trying to write that off. But what I'm saying is, in future, as we go through this, can we try these treatments first? Or can we try rehabbing it first or prehabbing it first and see how that works? And then taking everything into account, are we able to have an effect on that? Because realistically, in the long run, you're saving yourself 5 to 10,000. But if we can do that, and if there was better information out there that people understood this was what was causing it, could our treatment get a lot better, and could we reduce the amount of these that are going through our public system, and could we help these people? So we've discussed the history of pain and our understanding of what it is now and what influences it in terms of stress and sleep and fatigue and all these outside influencers that are going to have an effect on your nervous system, and stressors that are having an effect on your nervous system and how you perceive threats and dangers. When you think of that, I'm going to pose the question back to you, if you're sitting in your car, if you're listening to this now, in terms of how is COVID having an effect on people's pain? Personally speaking, I've been talking to a good few people in terms of I had clients that I'm working with at the moment through physio and mobility stuff. I've had relations as well who are suffering the same thing and getting these shoulder pains that they would have had a couple of years ago. Don't know where it came from, but it's starting to come on again. And the same with knee pain. And I off the top of my head, I know 4 people that are going to be going for either a knee replacement or a hip replacement or a shoulder rotator cuff repair surgery within the next 3 to 4 months. And when I asked them when they start, and this is consistent across all 4 people that are getting the replacements, when did it start? It started in February. That's 4 people getting replacements, and their pain started in February. Now, we went into lockdown in Ireland in March, around about the 9th of March. So the idea of COVID and the pressure that was coming on from COVID was building up around that time. Now, there is, let's say, 2 of the 4 that I'm just talking about specifically. Actually, no, when I'll go through it individually. So 2 of them are over the age of 65. They are looking at knee replacements. They said they had it a couple of years ago, didn't know, like, it went away, but now it's back again. Don't know what's causing it. Over 65, highest risk factors at the moment for COVID are people that are over 65 years old. So they're getting this insidious onset pain. Don't know where, they didn't injure it. They don't know where it came from. They had no fall or bang. It's just building up over time. Now, it's obviously a lot of things in terms of you have to stay inside, so you might not be exercising as much. But you have to take into account that stress, the real stress of COVID and the effect that coronavirus can have on these people, and it can be a life-threatening condition, or it can be a life-threatening virus, I should say. So there's obviously severe threat from the outside, from their environment at the moment. Now, the other 2 are unrelated, and both are parents of a child that is high risk at the moment in relation to COVID. So if you have a child that's high risk, whatever about yourself being high risk, if you have a child that's high risk, can you imagine the effect that that's going to have on your psychological well-being, and how that can transfer and how that can come out in your pain in your body? The amount of stress that you're going to be putting on your nervous system without even knowing. Obviously, you're conscious of the stress, but you don't know how that's affecting you. And then you're going to surgeons and you're getting referred on for MRIs. And then when you get your MRI, it's saying that you have a bulging disc in your back, even though it's not touching off. You have a rotator cuff tear, even though I think it's over 50% of people over the age of 50 now. Don't take that stat as fact, because I'd have to fact check that, but have a rotator cuff tear. with no symptoms again. And then knee as well, knee pain, or a lot of the time you'll hear it's bone on bone, but wouldn't have had pain before for whatever reason. But we know what reason now, it's the massive amount of stress that's put on them. That's where the pain is coming out. And they have previous experience with this injury. So they knew previously that, let's say the hip itself, they knew that was going to be an issue down the line at some stage in the back of their mind, because of the fact that they would have gotten it scanned before. So they know that could have been an issue, and now it's coming through. So this is what I'm trying to get across, is that COVID's having a huge effect on people's mental health at the moment, and it's having a huge effect on people's well-being. So pain is starting to come out in areas that they would have through insidious onset, in that there's no real mechanism of injury. They don't know what happened to it, and now they're getting referred on to surgeons. Now, not through no fault of their own. I don't know exactly what way they're taking this about or going about this, but if there's someone in pain and they want to get out of pain, a surgeon is going to want to fix them. Obviously, there is financial gain as well, but they will. Well, I would hope that their goal is that they want to improve that person's quality of life. But what I've said to these people, I've said, if it's possible at all, and it's easier said than done, because it's, from my perspective, I'm not in that pain, so it's easier said than done. But I said, if possible at all, continue on with a rehab program for 8 weeks and see if that comes down when COVID starts to relax, or when COVID isn't as much of a threat anymore. Hoping that is all I'm doing there, is hoping that it's not much of a threat anymore. And I'm discussing, and I'm telling them already, I'm describing what is influencing pain and what causes it and what can increase pain, in the hope that it gives them a better idea of why this pain is coming on at the moment, or what could be causing the pain. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I know that there was definitely 2 of them have put it off till after Christmas, in that we're working on an exercise program at the moment, to see if we can take down that pain. And then the other 2, I don't think I've broken through yet, but it's completely up to them. I'm not going to push anyone and tell anyone that this is what they have to do, because obviously it's what they have to do themselves to keep themselves going. So guys, that's everything that I wanted to discuss today. I hope it makes sense. Just a quick breakdown of what we talked about really fast is we talked about the history of pain, how it used to be on the humours of the body, and that was like yellow bile and black bile and phlegm and blood, and they thought it was imbalances of this that was causing the disease. But they also related this to relationship, occupation and diet, and they took those into account. So that's why I was saying it is actually connected. So what they talked about in Hippocrates' time, I hope that's right, in relation to those humours and being off in the body, and what drives them off in terms of relationship and occupation, and where they see themselves in society, and what they're eating at the moment, and how fatigued they are, is actually very similar to what we're coming back to now, and how the mind and body is connected. So that was the initial one. Then we talked about our understanding of pain now, and how the gate control theory of pain says the brain is able to decide what's a bigger threat. Then we went on to the neuromatrix, and the neuromatrix takes in the sensory information that it's getting, and then it adds that together with personal experience, previous experience with injury. Then it takes in thoughts and emotions, and it joins all those together, and then it outputs that pain. From there we went on to sensitization, in that if you're getting a lot of threats all the time, it's going to make your nervous system tweaked or more sensitized to pain. So you're going to get pain at lighter touches or lighter stimuli, you're going to get more pain. And then we went on from there to discuss what influences it in relation to society, the way you're thinking yourself, and biological factors that also influence it. Covered a lot of stuff when I think about it now. And then we talked about lumbar fusions and knee arthroscopies and how they can have an effect on you. And lastly, we talked about how COVID can have an effect on pain at the moment. So I'm going to finish on a quote from Hilary Mantel, and that's: pain cannot be divided from the emotions surrounding it. Apprehension sharpens it, hopelessness intensifies it, loneliness protracts it, making hours feel like days, so the worst pain is the unexplainable pain. So the next time you're getting that pain in your neck or your shoulder, and you've had it before a few times, and you don't know what the cause of it is, and you don't know what's bringing it on, make sure to take a look at your life and see what stressors are coming through in your life at the moment. How you feel about your job, how fatigued you are, how your sleep is recently. And Obviously, if you feel that there's any severe danger, or if you feel that pain is getting too bad, or if it's unrelenting pain, if it's constant pain, if you're getting pain that's waking you up at night, then you should definitely go to the doctor and definitely get it assessed. Or if you feel that you need to get it assessed, definitely get it assessed. What I've talked about here today is not medical advice. It's just hoping to shed some light on what pain is and improve your awareness of what causes pain. So that's everything from me today, guys. Thanks a million for signing in again. That's 4 episodes down now, so I'm starting to really enjoy it. At the start it was tough sitting down here trying to get through an episode and doing all the editing and stuff, but now I'm really starting to enjoy it a bit more. So we'll push on and we'll get another 10 or 15 episodes, and then we'll reassess then and we'll see how we go. So that's everything for now, guys. If anyone has any questions, you can get in contact with me on Instagram, or you can send me an email at mobilitytutor@gmail.com. You can also check out my website at themobilitytutor.com. And if you've anything you'd like me to cover, make sure to get in contact as well. I'd love, guys, if you got any benefit from this, if you could please repost it onto Instagram on your stories. That'll definitely drive up the engagement. And if you could rate it and leave a comment, that helps me out a huge amount, and I'd really appreciate that. So thanks a million, guys. I will chat to you all again soon. Have a good one.